This is my first sex in Bolivia story. So when I was growing up, I had a little issue, which was that I didn't like to ask people any questions. I thought I could figure out the answer to anything by myself. And so, if I had a question about something, I would just I didn't like people thinking that I didn't know something that I should know, basically. So I wouldn't ask, I would just come up with my own little theory about how it should work and go from there. So with sex, I had my own particular theory, which was that I couldn't really imagine how sex could be fun for women. Just couldn't really come up with that. It didn't make sense to me. So I kind of thought it was more like a favor that girls would do for guys if you were really nice. So I spent most of my time with girls that I liked trying to be really nice. And needless to say, that didn't get me really anywhere. So I was still a virgin at the age of 17, and I had just moved to Bolivia. And that was part of the issue too, was that I would move every 1 or 2 years. I never spent more than 2 years consecutively in any one place. So in one place I'd arrive and I'd be sort of ahead of everybody else. Then I would move somewhere else and they were all at a stage that was ahead of where I was. So I didn't really progress with people, and I certainly didn't ask any questions. I just acted like I knew everything and was as cool as I could possibly be. And that got me, some places, but really didn't work with sex very well. So there I was in Bolivia. School had started, and sex was definitely on my mind on occasion. And I was with a friend of mine. The other issue I should mention before I really get into the story is that I had a lot of friends at the school that were from different groups. I wasn't somebody who belonged to any one group and hung out with one group of people like most people did. I just kind of hung out with all the groups at different times, and it gave me an excuse not to go anywhere at all if I didn't feel like it. I would just tell all the other groups that I was going to be with some other group, and then stay home and nobody would notice. So this particular night, I had gone out with a friend of mine who was one of the Marines who guarded the embassy. And these guys were older only by a couple years, 20, 21, 22. We were all 17, 18. But they were really very much more mature and life experienced than the students at the school were, even if we pretended otherwise. So I was with a guy I really liked, really nice guy, and we went to this bar, and they went to different bars than the students did. They went to more, I guess I would call them adult bars. Now in Bolivia there really wasn't any drinking age. You could go into the bars at 13, 14, 15, and you were treated the same as somebody who was 19, 20, 21, whatever. So Mike and I, what's his name, Mike? I think his name was Mike. Mike and I were there, and we were drinking, and it was this total dive. And I had never been to a dive bar. Dive is a place that's really run down, bad lighting. It wasn't, the bars that we went to as students were mostly like disco bars. You could dance, you could drink, hang out. So Mike and I were drinking at this bar, and you could actually dance there, but it really was a dive in terms of how it was laid out, and prices were low. And in Bolivia at the time, it was in the middle of a massive, not depression, but it was like in Germany where you had huge inflation. And so I could go out, let's say with a girl, buy all my drinks, have 20 mixed drinks, pay for entrance to the club, pay for dinner for me and for the girl I was with, and it would all come to like, with big tips, $15 max. All right, the drinks were like 20 to 25 cents each, no joke. Peasants would carry bags around full of cash, and it would be like they had $5 total, and it was a bag that actually went down from their shoulders to below their knees. It was a really bad time actually to be Bolivian, but to be an American with dollars, it was crazy. So there I was drinking with Mike, talking, and I saw a girl that I knew I'd seen before, and in fact I knew she was a prostitute. And I knew that because one of the guys the students had hung out with, we'd seen her at one of the bars that we went to, and he said, "Oh, you see that girl? I was with her, she's a hooker." And that was kind of big stuff back when we were in high school. And she was pretty. And so I, thinking I would impress Mike with my worldly knowledge, pointed out the girl and said, "Oh yeah, she's a hooker." And instead of being impressed, he was like, "Ah, of course, all the girls here are hookers." And so I was like, "Wait, what?" And I looked around, and sure enough, this was not only a dive bar, but it was a place where you go to pick up hookers. So I was like, "Oh, And he said, "Oh, you like her?" "Oh, she's not bad." I said, "Oh, well, So there's another girl that was near her, and Mike said, well, you can be with her tonight. And I said, nah, that's okay. I don't have any money with me. And he said, don't worry, I'll pay for it. I said, well, I can't bring her back to my place. My father was the second in command under the ambassador, so he was what's called the DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission. And I said, I can't bring her back to my place. It'll be, my dad would, I'd never be able to explain to my dad what she's doing here. So I said, oh, don't worry, you can take her to the Marine House, which is where the Marines all live together. And so it's like, yeah, but, and I couldn't really think of any more great excuses, and I knew it wouldn't be particularly cool to just say no. So I said, oh, well, I don't, how much do you think it should cost? I said, well, you see that girl with her? Go ask her how much it would be for her and her friend, for us. And he asked me to ask her because I spoke Spanish, he didn't. And so I went up and I asked, how much for your friend and you tonight? And she said $50. I went back and told Mike, and he said, no way, that's a crazy amount here. Tell her 25, which I guarantee would be a good, she'll be happy with. And so I went up and kind of probably shaking a little, said, how about 25? And she said, okay. And I thought, uh-oh. And so she and her friend came back with us. We went up to the Marine car, a car that drove the Marines around with the driver. I'm sure the driver was impressed. And he drove us back. And one of the Marines, actually his name couldn't have been Mike, because it was Mike who was on vacation. I can't remember his name right now. Rick, I think. So anyway, I'm sorry. So this is Rick. And he told me that Mike was on vacation and I could use Mike's room. So Rick and I, boy am I screwing this up. Rick takes his girl and goes to his room, and I go with my hooker into Mike's room. And I remember I get in there, and she starts taking off her clothes, and I start taking off mine. And this is where I have to explain my theory of how sex worked. Because I hadn't, pornography, this was before the internet. The most I had seen in terms of pornography was Playboy, which only had women in it. I had never even really thought to myself how the mechanics of sex would function. So I'd come up with what I call today my car wash theory of sex, which if you've ever been to a car wash, you know that you park your car and it's put on sort of a conveyor belt, and the car gets moved forward, and there's things that come down and come across, and they blow on it, and they do all kinds of different things to the car, and pretty soon it's clean and waxed, and that's it. The car doesn't really have to do anything. So my theory was that it works sort of like this, that I put it in, and then you got all kinds of female anatomy doing neato things, and it would be really fun, and that was it. So we get into bed together, and I got on top and put it in and waited for the fireworks. And, so I'm waiting, she's sort of waiting and looking at me, and I'm looking at her, and I remember thinking, well, this isn't as amazing as I expected it to be. And I imagine she was probably thinking something along those lines, maybe not with the word amazing, but I don't know what exactly, but whatever. So we're looking at each other, just sort of wondering what the hell is going on. And I remember she finally started moving, sort of cluing me into the fact that I had to actually do something. And I remember thinking I remember the thought that it's like, oh, I have to move. That's a lot of work. And so I proceeded to move in the appropriate fashion for maybe 2 minutes, something like that. And I came, and I remember her looking at me, and she sort of realized something. She said, that's your first time, huh? And I wasn't going to admit that was my first time, so I said, nope, second. And I really must wonder now what she thought of the poor girl who went through the first experience. So anyhow, I can't remember anything other. I remember when I came out and we waited for Rick to finish up, and he came out and said something along the lines of, "Oh, it was so much fun," and did it twice. Don't know if I said, "Yeah, me too." I don't think so. I think I just sort of nodded like, "Yeah, maybe me too. Who knows?" But that was it. That was my first sex in Bolivia.